The night opened with a faint shuffle of leaves underfoot. A quiet path curved through the slope of a small hill, and a single lantern swayed from a wooden pole near the entrance. Its light was gentle, warm enough to soften the edges of everything around it. Mira stood there for a moment, letting her breath settle. She had come looking for a place to rest her thoughts, something that felt steady and familiar, even though she'd never walked this trail before. The air held a mild chill, the kind that brushed over her arms without rushing her. She lifted the lantern from its hook. The handle felt cool, almost smooth. When she stepped forward, the flame inside trembled, then steadied again at her pace. The ground was packed dirt, with thin lines of grass pushing through. Each step made a soft sound, almost like a hush. Trees leaned in from both sides, tall enough that their branches met above her and shaped the path into a long, slow tunnel. She paused now and then to listen. A stream murmured somewhere to her right. The sound drifted in and out as she moved, like someone breathing in sleep. A faint scent of wet stone and moss drifted through the air. Mira didn't rush. She didn't need to. The lantern light reached only a short distance ahead, so she followed that small circle of glow, letting it guide her at its own pace. The world behind her faded into quiet far up the path. A second light hung between the trees, soft, still, waiting. She moved toward it, steady step after steady step, feeling the small weight of the lantern pull gently at her hand. Something inside her eased, as if the path itself understood how tired she'd been. When she reached the next light, she saw a wooden bench set under it. The wood looked worn by rain and years, but dry enough to sit. She lowered herself onto it slowly, feeling the cool surface settle under her. The lantern flame gave a small flicker, then calmed again. Here, the night felt wide, safe, unrushed. She let her eyes fall half closed. The distant stream, the soft rustle of branches, the low glow of the lantern above her. All of it mixed into a quiet rhythm that matched her breathing. And somewhere farther along the trail, she could see a faint third light waiting in the distance. She knew she'd walk to it soon. Not yet. For now, she rested with the glow above her and the slow night around her. Mira sat long enough for her breathing to fall into a soft, even pattern. The bench held a bit of the night's chill, but the lantern beside her warmed the air just enough to settle her shoulders. She rubbed her thumb along the handle of her own lantern, feeling the tiny bumps in the metal. Little details grounded her, kept her inside the quiet. When she finally stood, her knees felt loose, almost lighter than before. She lifted the lantern again, and its glow spread over the path ahead. The next light down the trail waited like a small promise. The trees leaned back as she walked, opening just enough to show bits of sky. No moon yet, just faint stars scattered like grains of salt. They didn't shine too bright. They hung there, soft and steady, as if they wanted her to take her time. The path curved to the left. She dragged the tip of her shoe along the dirt as she walked, letting it draw a thin line, a slow habit. Her steps found a natural rhythm with the sounds around her. A cricket here, a leaf falling there. The stream kept its low murmur on her right, unchanged. A cool breeze brushed her cheek, not harsh, just enough to remind her she was moving, not stuck in her own thoughts anymore. As she neared the third lantern, she saw a stone wall beside it, old stones stacked by someone long gone. Moss had grown between the cracks, soft to the touch. Mira ran her fingers across it. The stone felt cool and slightly damp, like it had been holding the memory of rain. She stood there for a moment, letting her hand rest on it. A small pulse of calm moved through her. This place carried its own history, quiet and patient behind the wall. The land dipped gently. She could hear the stream more clearly here, flowing over small rocks. The sound rolled smoothly, a constant whisper that matched her footsteps. She moved closer to the lantern above the wall. Its flame barely swayed. It felt almost still, as if the air around it was holding its breath. Mira lifted her lantern slightly, letting the two lights meet. Their glow blended into a soft wash over the stones. She liked the way they merged. No rush, no struggle. From there, she noticed something she hadn't before. A wooden sign stood at the far edge of the wall, its paint faded, letters barely visible in the dim light. She stepped toward it. Just enough glow touched the surface for her to read the faint words: lantern path, halfway point. Rest as needed. Continue when ready. She let out a slow breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Halfway, she liked that. Something about knowing she wasn't at the start anymore, yet not close to the end, felt right for tonight. She leaned her shoulder against the stone wall, letting the cool surface support her weight. Her lantern rested at her side, warm against her fingers. The fourth light down the trail sat far ahead, barely visible, waiting in the distance, like a quiet thought she wasn't ready to unpack yet. She'd reach it soon, but right now, she let herself stay in this moment, where nothing pressed on her and the night carried her gently forward. Mira pushed off the stone wall with slow movement, letting her balance settle before she stepped forward again. Her lantern gave a small glow across the path, steady and warm. The air near the stream felt cooler now, as if the water carried its own night along with it. The path dipped toward the sound. Her shoes brushed over loose gravel, each piece giving a soft crunch under her steps. The closer she got, the clearer the stream became. It wasn't deep, just a narrow ribbon of water sliding over smooth rocks. The scent here shifted too, carrying a hint of wet earth and fresh grass. She crouched at the edge and dipped 2 fingers into the stream. The water touched her skin with a cool shock that faded into comfort. She let her hand rest there for a moment, feeling the gentle pull of the current. A few fireflies drifted near the surface, their light rising and fading like slow breathing. She watched one float toward her lantern, hover, then drift back over the stream. The tiny glow felt friendly somehow, like the night wasn't empty at all. Mira stood again, wiping her fingers on the side of her pants. She lifted her lantern and followed the curve of the water. The path tracked beside it for a stretch, gently turning as the stream turned. The night felt larger here, more open, as if something beyond the trees was waiting to be noticed. The 4th lantern ahead flickered faintly, tucked between 2 tall pines. Their trunks rose like quiet watchers, holding the space with calm presence. Mira moved toward them, her breathing slow and comfortable. As she reached the lantern, she saw a small wooden bridge beyond it. Simple, no rails, just planks set across the stream. The light from her lantern brushed the edges of the boards. Some looked newer, some worn. It felt like many people had crossed this very spot, each leaving behind a small trace of themselves. Mira stepped onto the first plank. It dipped slightly under her weight, not enough to worry her, just enough to remind her she was here, alive, moving. The water below whispered its quiet rhythm. When she reached the middle, she stopped. The stream's sound echoed a little under the bridge, hollow and soothing at the same time. She lowered her lantern halfway, letting its glow paint shapes in the moving water. She didn't think about anything heavy, not the past, not what waited tomorrow, just the water, the wood under her feet, and the night holding her gently. A soft gust moved through the trees. The lantern flames in the distance shifted, glowing brighter for a moment, as if encouraging her. Mira stepped off the bridge with calm pace. The path climbed upward again, not steep, just enough for her legs to feel the shift. Far up the trail, the 5th light shone with a warmer glow than the others, almost like someone had tended it recently. She felt a quiet pull toward it, and she followed. And she followed. The path rose gently, and Mira felt each step in a slow, steady pull through her legs. The air shifted again as she climbed, A hint of pine drifted from the trees. Dry, clean, grounding. She breathed it in without thinking. The fifth lantern glowed brighter than the rest. Its light carried a warmer tone, almost like a small fire tucked inside the glass. Mira lifted her own lantern a little, letting the two circles of light meet halfway on the trail. The glow between them softened the shadows around her feet as she approached. She noticed the lantern hung lower than the others. Someone had tied it with fresh rope. The knot looked recent. Her fingers brushed against it as she passed by, and the fibers felt rough. Not yet worn by weather, beside the lantern sat a wooden crate, simple, unpainted. The lid propped open just enough to show what rested inside. A folded blanket, a small clay cup, a bundle of dried herbs tied with thin twine. Mira touched the edge of the crate and felt the slightest warmth in the wood, as if someone had set these items down not too long ago. The blanket's fabric brushed her fingertips, soft, thicker than it looked. A small tag hung from the herb bundle, handwritten, barely readable in the dim glow. For travelers, rest when needed. She let out a slow breath. Someone had cared enough to leave these things along the path. Not for one person, for anyone who walked here with a tired mind. She took the blanket and draped it over her shoulders. The weight settled across her back in a comforting way. Not heavy, just enough to quiet the last bit of tension in her muscles. Mira sat beside the crate. The ground was dry here, cushioned by a thin layer of pine needles. They made a soft crackle under her as she shifted. The pine scent rose again. Calming her chest, she poured a little water from her flask into the clay cup, watching the surface ripple in the lantern light. The clay felt cool in her hands, the kind of texture that grounded her in the moment. She sipped slowly. The simple act eased something inside her that had been knotted for too long. The night around her remained still. Warm glow beside her, stream behind her, trees leaning quietly overhead. Farther down the trail, the sixth lantern waited with faint light, barely visible through the rise of the hill. She would reach it after a while, but not yet. For now, she wrapped the blanket a little tighter and let her thoughts drift the way. Leaves drift through calm water. Nothing rushed her here. Nothing demanded anything. Just the slow night and her quiet footsteps, waiting to continue whenever she felt ready. Asterisk. Mira stood again with slow movement, gathering the blanket around her shoulders. The warmth it held made the cool air feel softer. Her lantern cast a steady circle of light over the pine needles as she stepped back onto the path. The trail rose a little more now. Each step pressed gently into the earth, leaving shallow prints that smoothed out almost instantly as loose soil shifted behind her. The blanket brushed the back of her legs, moving with her rhythm. As she climbed, the trees opened wider. Their branches lifted higher, letting more of the sky come through. A faint shimmer of stars stretched across the dark, steady and quiet. The air here felt thinner, touched by a slight breeze that slipped past her with a chilled kiss. The sixth lantern's glow appeared at the top of the rise, dimmer than the warm one she'd left behind. Not neglected, just distant. When she reached the hilltop, she paused. A large, flat stone sat at the center, shaped by nature into a smooth seat. Light brushed its surface, revealing thin streaks of quartz lines across it. She ran her hand along the stone. Cool, clean, solid. The view from the top widened the moment she turned. The stream shimmered far below. Lanterns behind her lined the path in soft dots of golden light, each one steady, each one marking the steps she had already taken. The sight eased her in a way she didn't expect. She sat on the stone and let her legs stretch out. The texture under her palms grounded her. Her breathing settled into slow waves that matched the breeze moving through the tall grass. Nearby, small sounds layered themselves around her. An owl calling once in the distance. A few leaves scratching lightly against each other. The low hum of the night, steady as a heartbeat. Her lantern flickered as she set it on the stone beside her. The glow slid across the surface, outlining small dips and soft curves. She rested her head back slightly, eyes half closed. The stars above grew a little brighter, as if noticing she finally had space to look. Up here, the world felt gentle, quiet in a way that didn't feel empty. More like the night was giving her room to breathe. A narrow wooden post stood near the sixth lantern, another message etched in its surface. Past this point, the path turns toward the old cabin. Take your time. The night is patient. She traced the carved letters with her thumb. The grooves fell shallow, worn down by weather and years, but still readable. The mention of a cabin stirred something inside her. A soft curiosity, a sense of shelter somewhere ahead. She stood again, taking her lantern. The blanket slid comfortably over her shoulders, keeping her held in its warmth. Ahead, the seventh lantern glowed faintly between tall grass, guiding her toward the next stretch of trail. She walked toward it, slow and steady, letting the hilltop quiet linger inside her as she moved. Asterix, the path dipped gently as Mira left the hilltop. Tall grass brushed against her legs, dry at the tips and cool near the roots. Each step made a soft rustle, steady and calm. Her lantern swung lightly in her hand, spreading warm light across the narrow trail ahead. The seventh lantern stood close to the bend. Its glow flickered in the breeze, softer than the others, as if it preferred to stay quiet. Mira paused beside it. The wooden pole holding it leaned forward slightly, giving the lantern a small tilt that made the light fall unevenly across the ground. She liked the imperfection. It felt honest, lived dash in dot. Beyond the bend, the trees thickened again, not crammed again, not crowded, just enough to shape the path into a sheltered hallway of branches. The scent shifted back to damp leaves and cool bark. Her blanket held its warmth around her shoulders as she stepped inside the dimmer stretch. The sounds changed, too. The stream was farther now, replaced by the distant creak of shifting branches. A single drop of water fell somewhere deeper in the woods, small but easy to hear in the quiet. Mira moved slowly, letting her feet find their own rhythm. The path curved and curved again, gentle spirals that made her feel like she was being led deeper into something meant to be kept safe. After a while, she noticed the shape of wooden steps ahead, 3 of them, set into the earth, edges softened by age. She lifted her lantern higher. The 8th lantern waited at the top of the steps, hanging from the lower branch of a large oak. Its glow stretched across the ground and touched the edges of something farther up the slope. A fence, old wood, gray with time, straight lines softened by moss. Mira climbed the steps slowly. The wood creaked under her weight in a low, tired voice. When she reached the top, she rested her hand on the fence. The surface felt cool and slightly rough. Flecks of old bark embedded in the grain. Beyond the fence, the path widened into a small clearing. Grass lay flat in places, as if many feet had rested here. And at the far end of the clearing, tucked quietly between 2 tall pines, stood a small cabin. No smoke, no lantern outside, just the shape of a roof, the faint outline of a door, and windows dark but peaceful. Her heart softened at the sight. Not excitement, just a warm pull, like recognizing something she didn't know she needed. She stepped through the opening in the fence. The blanket brushed her arms. Her lantern gave a soft glow over the clearing. The cabin waited in stillness, patient and calm. The 9th lantern rested on a short post near the door, unlit. Strange. Every lantern so far had held its own flame. Mira walked toward it, curious. The wick looked dry, untouched for a long time, but a small box of matches sat beside the post. A simple gesture, an invitation. Maybe she held her lantern close and reached for a match. Her fingers brushed the wooden stick, warm, as if someone had placed the box there not long ago. She felt a quiet shift inside her, a sense that a cabin wasn't abandoned. just waiting for whoever reached it. She struck the match. The small flame rose with a soft hiss, lighting her face in faint orange glow. She leaned forward to bring the 9th lantern to life. The match burned with a small, steady flame. Mira cupped her hand around it to block the breeze. The air carried a cool draft from between the pines, just enough to make the flame bend, but not enough to break it. She touched the flame to the wick inside the 9th lantern. For a second, nothing happened. Then the wick caught with a quiet jump of light, growing into a calm glow that filled the glass. Warm light spread slowly across the clearing. The cabin's wooden boards showed faint textures, now long grains shaped by weather. The door stood slightly off-center, old hinges darkened with age. A single step led to the entrance. The wood faded but strong. Mira let the match burn down until it touched her fingers. She dropped the last bit of flame into the dirt, watching it hiss out. She set her own lantern next to the newly lit one. Their glow mixed together, a soft wash of warmth that reached the edges of the clearing. The air felt different now, not brighter, just fuller. She walked toward the door with slow steps, the blanket brushing her back with a small weight that kept her grounded. The cabin's silence didn't feel empty. It felt like a long breath held in gentle waiting. Her palm rested on the wood of the door. Cool, solid, faint. Ridges pressed into her skin. She pushed lightly. The door moved inward without a sound. No resistance, no groan of old hinges. It felt cared for, even though it looked worn. Inside, darkness held the room. Soft, not heavy. A stillness that didn't close in, but spread outward like an open hand. Mira lifted her lantern and stepped inside. Dust didn't rise. The air was clean. A faint scent of cedar clung to the walls, warm and familiar. Somehow, a small table stood in the center of the room. 2 chairs, one pulled out slightly, the other tucked in, as if someone left only a moment before she arrived. A shelf lined one wall. A few jars, some dried flowers, a folded piece of cloth, everything placed with simple care. Her eyes settled on a small metal kettle resting near the hearth, cold, unused recently. But beside it sat a neat bundle of firewood, bark still clinging to the pieces. Someone had prepared this place for a traveler. She ran her hand over the table's surface. It felt smooth, worn by hands she would never know. The lantern light warmed the wood, bringing out shapes and lines hidden in the grain. A soft sigh slipped from her without effort. Something about this cabin loosened the last bit of weight that had clung to her all night. The room held a quiet that matched her own breath, a quiet that waited, patient and steady. She wasn't sure why, but she felt like she was expected here. Not in a strange way, in a gentle, human way. As if someone understood the kind of tired she carried outside. The ninth lantern's glow shimmered faintly through the open door. Reaching the edge of the table, Mira stood still, letting the room settle around her. There was another space behind a curtain on the right. The fabric barely moving with a faint draft. She stepped toward it, lifting her lantern a little higher. Whatever rested behind that curtain felt like the next step she was meant to take. Mira reached out and touched the edge of the curtain. The fabric felt soft and slightly cool, as if it had been washed many times. It swayed gently under her fingers. She paused for a moment, letting her breath ease before she drew it aside. Her lantern light floated into the small room beyond. The space was simple. A narrow bed sat against the wall, layered with a thick quilt that looked handmade. Patterns of uneven stitching ran across it, the kind that came from careful hands working slowly over long evenings. The colors had faded, but the fabric still looked warm. A low wooden stool sat beside the bed. On it rested a small journal with a smooth cover, corners softened. Beside the journal lay a pencil, sharpened but short. Mira stepped inside, the blanket around her shoulders falling gently along her arms. The air in this room held a faint scent of dried herbs, something calming, like lavender mixed with pine. She set her lantern on the stool. The glow warmed the space, brushing over the quilt and the wooden walls. Her shadow stretched softly behind her. She ran her fingers along the quilt. The threads had a raised texture. She pressed her palm down and felt the warmth trapped inside the layers. Whoever made it knew how to stitch comfort into fabric. She sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped under her weight, firm but forgiving. Her shoulders softened the moment she settled. For the first time since she stepped onto the lantern path, Mira felt her body recognize how tired it really was. The climb, the quiet, the slow drift of thoughts, all of it settled deeper into her muscles, a gentle heaviness that felt safe. She lifted the journal. The cover felt smooth, edges rounded by years of use. She hesitated before opening it, unsure if it was meant for her. But something in the room felt welcoming, not private. The first page held a line written in small handwriting. For whoever finds this place, rest. Take what you need. Leave when your heart feels lighter. The letters felt steady, as if the writer had been calm when they wrote it. The message carried warmth, simple and sincere. She closed the journal and placed it back on the stool. The lantern flickered softly, casting slow-moving shadows along the ceiling. Mira breathed with the rhythm of the flame steady in slow out, letting her thoughts drift without pushing them anywhere. Outside, she heard a faint sound, one soft knock against a wooden step. Not from a person. It sounded more like the blanket brushing the doorway in a small breeze. She didn't move. The sound passed as quickly as it came. The quiet settled again. She lay back on the quilt. The fabric hugged the shape of her shoulders. The pillow carried the faint scent of cedar, warm and clean. Her lantern glowed beside her, soft enough to calm her eyes. She let her gaze rest on the wooden ceiling. Knots and lines in the wood made small shapes loops, swirls, paths that split and joined again. They looked like pieces of the trail she had just walked. Her breathing slowed. A warm stillness wrapped around her, somewhere deeper in the cabin. A barely audible creak echoed, the kind old wood makes when it settles in the night. Mira didn't feel alarm. The sound had the same gentle tone as everything else on this path. Part of the place's quiet rhythm. She closed her eyes halfway. A thought drifted through her mind, soft, almost weightless. She wondered who built this cabin and why they cared so much for people they would never meet. The answer wasn't urgent. The night would carry it in its own time. Outside, the 10th lantern's glow shimmered faintly through the trees, waiting somewhere beyond the clearing. But for now, Mira stayed where she was, wrapped in warmth, held by the soft quiet of the little cabin in the woods. Asterisk. Mira rested on the quilt for a long moment, letting the room hold her in its calm. The lantern's glow softened the edges of everything, turning the wooden walls into warm, quiet shapes. Her breath drifted in slow, even pulls, settling deeper with each one. Eventually, she sat up again, not because she felt restless, more because something in the air shifted, gentle and steady. Like the cabin wanted to show her something she hadn't seen yet. She lifted the lantern from the stool. Its light warmed her hand, the metal handle smoothing under her grip. The blanket slid from her shoulders as she stood, so she gathered it again, wrapping it close. The weight felt right. Stepping back into the main room, she noticed something new. Not an object, just a small change in the air. The cedar scent felt stronger now, drifting from the walls as if the wood held memories of every traveler who had passed through. The place seemed alive in its own quiet way. Not watching, just welcoming, she moved toward the hearth. The firewood bundle rested where she had seen it earlier, neat and ready. She knelt beside it and touched one of the logs. Dry, light. The surface carried the faint, and it gave a soft, hollow ring as it shifted on the stone. She set it down again, feeling the simple comfort in its presence. She didn't need a fire right now. The warmth in the room came from somewhere deeper, something held in the quietness of the space. She stood again and turned toward the window. The glass pane had a slight fog on it, shaped by her breath when she leaned closer. She wiped a small circle with her sleeve. Through it, she saw the 9th lantern glowing outside. Soft gold in the dark clearing. A steady light that made the night around it feel gentle. Farther beyond, between the trees, she thought she saw a faint shimmer deeper in the forest. Not bright like the lanterns, just a soft reflection moving through the branches. She blinked a few times, trying to place it, but the shimmer faded. The forest settles differently at night. She knew that. The path always seemed to show what it wanted you to notice. Nothing more. Her eyes drifted across the room again. The table, the chairs, the quiet space behind her. Everything felt lived in, but untouched. Kept for moments like this when someone needed a pause in their life. She walked back to the stool, lifted the journal again, and this time she opened it to one of the blank pages. She didn't plan to write anything. She just wanted to feel the smooth paper under her fingers. A calm feeling rose inside her, something quiet and steady. Not joy, not sadness, just a sense that the cabin had been waiting for her to breathe in this stillness, to let the night settle her from the inside. When she closed the journal, the air felt a little lighter. It was then she noticed another detail. Near the door, a second small note hung from a nail on the wall. She hadn't seen it when she first walked in. Maybe the lantern light hadn't reached that corner. Maybe she hadn't looked closely enough. She stepped toward it and lifted her lantern. The handwriting matched the journal. Travelers usually rest here for a while. Some stay for a night. Some leave sooner. There is no rule. The path waits. Mira, read the words twice. Simple lines. Gentle intent. She let her fingertip tap the edge of the note, almost like a thank you. A soft breeze slid through the doorway behind her, brushing the curtain and making the flame inside her lantern sway a little. That small drift of air carried a hint of the outside world, something like a reminder. The cabin was a place to rest, not a place to stop forever. She turned her gaze toward the door. The clearing waited quietly, and beyond it, barely visible between distant branches, the glow of the 10th lantern sat in the night. Not bright, just present. When she stepped outside, the blankets stayed around her shoulders. The air met her gently. Her lantern swung at her side with a soft rhythm. The 9th lantern glowed beside the door, a small anchor, a warm goodbye. The 10th one waited beyond the trees. She walked toward it with slow steps, the earth cool under her feet, the cabin behind her breathing softly into the night. Asterisk, Mira stepped from the cabin and into the clearing, the blanket wrapped firmly around her shoulders. The night greeted her gently. The trees stood tall and quiet, silhouettes painted against a deep, Velvety sky, the ninth lantern, glowed steadily behind her. Its warmth, a soft anchor she could feel even without turning back. Ahead, the 10th lantern waited. Its glow was different from the others. Less bright, more like a whisper of light. It flickered slowly, as though breathing. Mira approached it with unhurried steps, letting her body adjust again to the open air after the calm shelter of the cabin. The lantern hung from a low branch of a cedar tree. Its metal frame was older than the others, tarnished in places. Delicate patterns etched along the top that caught the light in small glimmers. When she stood before it, the flame inside shifted, almost leaning in her direction. Mira held her own lantern close, and for a moment the two lights mingled, spreading soft gold over the moss-covered ground. The forest around her seemed to lean inward, listening. She reached out and touched the 10th lantern. The metal was warm, warmer than it should have been. The flame inside flared slightly, then settled into a slow pulse. A rhythm, a heartbeat. Mira stilled, her fingers lightly resting against the lantern's side. The flame pulsed again, soft, then softer, then steady. The pattern wasn't random. It felt like presence. Not a voice, not a message, just a sensitivity. Unknowing, her throat tightened gently, not with fear, but with the strange feeling of being understood without words. The air around her shifted, not wind, not temperature, just an awareness. Her thoughts stirred, slow ones, the kind that were hard to articulate even to herself. Thoughts of why she came, the things that weighed at the edges of her days. The quiet ache she carried without naming. She didn't speak any of it. She didn't need to. The lantern flickered once more, brighter, this time, then steadied. Like someone nodding, something in Mira's chest loosened. A knot she didn't realize she had tied. She exhaled, long and controlled. The breath misting faintly in the cool air. The forest remained silent, but the silence felt full now, not empty. The 10th lantern's flame began to dim but not fade. It shifted from gold to a softer hue, like the moment just before dawn, when light brushes the world rather than claims it. Mira understood. This lantern wasn't guiding her to a place. It was acknowledging her presence, noticing her journey, meeting her where she was. She stepped back a little. The flame responded, just a faint, warm pulse. A thank you, or a farewell, or simply an echo of her own calm. When she turned, she found something she hadn't seen on the way in. A path. Not a trail of lanterns this time. A natural path, soft earth, scattered leaves, stones placed just so, by chance or by care. It stretched deeper into the forest, lit only by the faint glow of her own lantern. The 10th lantern flickered, casting its final soft pulse of light. Mira tightened the blanket around her shoulders. She lifted her lantern, and she began walking the new path, each step steady, quiet. And sure, the 10th lantern stayed behind, its light fading into the forest's dark, not disappearing, just becoming part of the night. Asterisk, night. Asterisk. Mira walked slowly, letting the rhythm of her steps match her breathing. The blanket around her shoulders was warm and comforting, carrying the faint scent of the cabin. Her lantern swung gently at her side, casting a circle of soft light on the forest floor. The path between the trees was narrow. Moss and fallen leaves covered parts of it, making each step quiet. She didn't rush. The world around her felt expansive, even though the trail itself was small and intimate. Branches arched overhead, forming gentle curves that shifted with the faint night breeze. The sound of the stream from earlier drifted faintly through the trees, distant but steady, like a soft reminder that the world continued beyond this quiet moment. As she moved, Mira noticed subtle details she hadn't seen before. A cluster of mushrooms near a tree root, shaped like tiny umbrellas. A low-hanging branch, its needles brushing her cheek with a cool softness. The faint sparkle of moisture on a leaf, catching her lantern light for a brief second before it vanished. She paused for a moment to listen. The forest was alive, but not in a loud way. Not with movement or sound that startled, just small whispers through the needles, the stream far below. A faint rustle somewhere beyond the reach of her light. She walked again, letting her feet follow the curve of the path. Each step pressed gently into the earth, leaving traces that the wind or time would erase later. It felt comforting, knowing her passage was temporary in the forest's long memory, far ahead. A soft glow appeared between the trees, not a lantern, not a fire, but something faint, almost like moonlight trapped among the branches. Mira walked toward it, her pace steady. The glow shifted with her movement, welcoming but not demanding. The blanket moved lightly with her steps, the folds catching shadows and light in gentle waves. Her lantern cast soft, dancing shapes on the trunks around her, making them appear to breathe slowly, in time with her own calm. The path curved again, and she realized she had reached a small clearing, a patch of earth open to the sky. Stars shone faintly through the treetops. The soft hum of the night seemed to gather here, as if the forest was holding its breath in quiet. Acknowledgement of her presence, Mira stepped into the clearing and set her lantern on the ground. The light pooled around her feet. She sank down slowly, wrapping the blanket closer around her shoulders. The cool earth beneath her was balanced by the warmth of the fabric. She didn't look toward the glow she had seen through the trees. Not yet. For a moment, she allowed herself to simply be sitting, breathing. A leaf fell softly nearby. A gentle wind slid through the clearing, carrying the smell of pine and earth. Mira closed her eyes, letting the forest hold her, letting the soft night weave around her in quiet. Patient threads. The path ahead waited, but she didn't need to move. Not yet. Mira stayed in the clearing for a while longer, letting her body sink into the calm of the night. Her lantern light glowed softly around her, pooling over the moss and leaves that covered the forest floor. The blanket held her like a quiet shield, warm and gentle. When she finally stood, the air felt different, softer, thicker with the scent of pine and damp earth. The forest seemed to lean closer, the shadows stretching and bending without threat. Just quiet observation. She followed the faint glow she had glimpsed earlier, stepping lightly so as not to disturb the small creatures that rustled in the underbrush. Her lantern's light traced the edges of the path, catching tiny droplets of moisture that sparkled faintly like the last flickers of stars. The trail twisted and dipped, weaving between tall trees with low branches that brushed her shoulders as she passed. The leaves overhead whispered softly in the wind, a delicate, almost melodic susurration. Each whisper felt like a word, but one she didn't need to understand. It was enough to know she was being heard. After a gentle curve, the path opened onto a small stream, narrow but clear. The water ran over smooth stones, its soft murmur blending with the forest's whispers. Mira knelt for a moment, trailing her fingers through the cool water. It flowed around her hand without rushing, patient and constant. She stood again, lantern lifted, blanket snug around her shoulders. The path ahead rose slightly, and she noticed a faint light glimmering between the trunks of two trees, a light that was softer than any lantern. It pulsed gently, like a heartbeat hidden in the night, drawn toward it. The forest seemed to part subtly around her, small openings appearing in the underbrush to guide her forward. Shadows shifted like they had lives of their own, but they never touched her. She reached the source of the glow, a small cluster of stones arranged in a circle, each topped with a tiny crystal that caught the lantern's light. The crystals pulsed faintly, a rhythm that felt almost alive, almost listening. Mira knelt beside the circle. The forest quieted further, as though it had gathered its breath. She placed her hand over one of the crystals. It was cool, smooth, and slightly humming under her touch. She felt a gentle vibration move through her palm, spreading warmth into her chest. The stones didn't speak. They didn't need to. They simply waited, acknowledged, welcomed. She sat back on her heels, wrapping her blanket more tightly. Her lantern cast soft shadows over the stones, making their pulsing light glow in gentle waves across the clearing. The whispers of the leaves seemed to settle into a lullaby just for her, slow and soothing. For the first time since she began walking the lantern path, Mira allowed herself to close her eyes completely. The forest, the stream, the stones, even the faint distant light, everything folded together into a quiet cocoon. She breathed in slowly and let it go. The night listened. The crystals pulsed, and Mira felt the first true stillness of the journey settle in her bones. Mira stayed kneeling beside the circle of stones for a long while, letting the calm pulse through her. The forest seemed to breathe with her, each exhale blending with the faint whisper of leaves. Her blanket held warmth like a quiet companion, the lantern casting gentle light across the crystal's dot. Eventually, she rose, brushing her hands on her legs. The last light, the 10th lantern, still pulsed softly behind her, near the path that led back to the cabin. But a new glow appeared ahead, faint and steady, barely visible between the trees. She walked toward it. The trail sloped gently upward, winding past ferns that brushed the sides of her legs. Each step pressed into the earth, leaving shallow imprints that vanished almost as soon as she took the next. The glow grew slightly brighter as she approached. It was small, not a lantern. Rather, a tiny cluster of fireflies hovering just above the moss-covered ground. Their light pulsed gently, mimicking the rhythm of the 10th lantern behind her dot. The fireflies seemed to wait for her, just as the crystals and the lanterns had. She knelt slightly, letting the glow wash over her face. The forest was quiet now, quieter than it had been anywhere along the path. Not empty, but full of listening, of acknowledgement. The trail behind her, the cabin, the stones, and the lanterns, they were all pieces of a journey that had nothing urgent, nothing demanding. She exhaled slowly. Her lantern hung at her side, steady in her grip. The blanket fell softly around her shoulders. She felt the pull of the path beneath her feet, the soft earth, the gentle incline, the curve of the trail through the trees. But she didn't need to move forward. Not yet. The fireflies flickered, pulsing in rhythm with a last lantern. It was as if the night itself was breathing with her. Mira sank to the moss, resting her back against a tree. Her eyes half closed, the glow of the fireflies and lanterns dancing over her face. The forest held her. The night listened. Somewhere, faintly, the stream continued its steady murmur. A leaf drifted down, landing gently on the moss beside her hand. The crystals from before pulsed faintly in her memory, carrying the warmth of everything she had passed. The path would remain when she was ready to move again. The cabin waited if she returned. The lanterns glowed patiently, but for now, Mira rested in the quiet embrace of the forest. The gentle lights surrounding her, and the soft, endless rhythm of the night breathing alongside her. Her eyes closed fully. The world faded to calm, and the journey paused as the lantern path whispered its last lullaby. Its last lullaby.